We're all addicted to something. I mean, I'm struggling right now because my son's introduced me to Call of Duty, Black Ops. And I swore I would never touch that. It was too complicated. And I got a new iPad and I started messing around with it. And I'm like, man, this is so therapeutically dissociative. Every now and then I can jump on there and just shoot some soldiers. So I'm like, Lord, I need to be careful with this because now I know why these kids sit in their rooms all day. It's a wild ride with technology.
Welcome to What We Really Want, conversations about connection. Settle in and get ready for a great conversation. Let's talk about what we really want.
Hey friends, this is Greg Oliver. Welcome back to What We Really Want. Today's episode 39. Our guest is Todd Fields, and the episode's called You Are Loved and Not Alone. I'm really excited about this one. I mean, I'm excited about all of our episodes, but particularly this one because Todd Fields is a person that I have known about for the better part of 30 years, but I just got to meet him a couple of years ago and have really come to even more deeply appreciate what he's about with his life and ministry and his calling, even than I did before. He was involved with Louie Giglio in the early days of 722 at Northpoint Community Church in Atlanta. His involvement there is even pre what everybody knows today as passion music. Todd has written and led so many amazing and influential worship songs over the years. And so it was really exciting when I got to meet him a couple of years ago and just tell him how meaningful his ministry had been to me. And then to find out about what he's been doing for about the past decade that is even more meaningful. Todd and his wife, Carrie, started Worship Circle in 2014 as a way of helping people who are in worship leading ministry care for their own hearts and spiritual well-being. That's where the title of the episode came from, You Are Loved and Not Alone. That's something that they want people involved in Worship Circle to know all the time. The way they do that is by putting together small groups that meet virtually over the course of a year, and each of these groups is led by someone that probably anyone in worship ministry has heard of. Their small group leaders have included Paul Balash, Natalie Grant, Mac Brock, Christian Stanfill, Christy Nockels, Charlie Hall, Matt Marr, Jill Phillips, and Andy Gullahorn, who have both been guests on this show. It's just an incredible way for worship leaders to be invested in, not just for what they can bring to the church and their skill, but in who they are as a person and caring for their hearts. So I really am looking forward to you hearing this conversation. Just to kind of kick it off, I was able to grab a little bit of time on a Zoom call with Andy Gullahorn to talk not just about his new album that came out recently called Winning Streak, but also about how he came to connect with Todd and be a part of Worship Circle as one of the small group leaders. And so we're going to let you hear from Andy right now. What is up, Andy Gullahorn?
Hey, Greg.
You just had kind of a big weekend. You had a new record come out Friday.
I did, yeah. My new record that has been a very long time coming was released officially to the world on Friday.
The record's called Winning Streak, and you've been writing these songs for several years, but your last record came out, 7 years ago?
Yeah, I think it came out 2018. Yeah, some of these songs, I've been playing at Roots Retreats for that long.
That's right, because listening to this quote-unquote new record, I'm like, well, I've heard that song 30 times already.
You've probably heard all of them 30 times already.
Not all of them. But we're here to talk for a few minutes about our mutual friend, Todd Fields, who is our guest for this episode. I met Todd in your backyard a couple of years ago.
Around a fire, maybe?
Around the fire that singed our eyebrows. In the interview, we talked a little bit about your annual birthday bash where you burn dead Christmas trees, and we sat as close to the fire as we could and talked for about an hour that first time. Really got to know each other well, and then saw each other again this year. We have you to thank for knowing each other.
Well, thanks for coming to my birthday party.
For sure. So how long have you known Todd?
Well, Todd tells me that the first time that we ever interacted, he sent me an email back in 2000. He's a great guitarist, a great musician, but he heard something in my wife Jill's records about the guitar, and he emailed me with some guitar question. And I was like, when he first told me that, I was like, oh no, I probably didn't write you back. But he's like, no, I did write him back. So we had some exchange, probably 25 years ago, but then crossed paths again. I don't know how many years now. I was going to say 5 or 6. It could be 8 or it could be 4, but it was a while ago. And I just love getting to know him. And he has a similar heart for the kind of work that we actually do at the Roots Retreats. His heart is kind of helping worship leaders get in touch with their hearts. So we kind of felt that commonality, and he wrote me into being a part of Worship Circle. So I've been a small group leader at Worship Circle for, I'm going to say 2 years. It could be 10 years, but I think it's 2.
When you said helping worship leaders get in touch with their hearts, I think there would probably be some people who hear that and are confused because they would think, well, gosh, I mean, I would just assume by default that worship leaders are in touch with their heart. I just know from the 15 years that I did it, how disengaged from my heart I was for a multitude of reasons. But, not feeling like I could really be known fully, not really feeling safe to be authentic, all the above.
I think you're probably right. I think 97% of worship leaders are totally connected with their hearts and have no issues whatsoever. But then there's like 3 or 4 of them out there that have problems, and that's kind of who we were geared for. No, I think anybody who is working in kind of a servant position, like what you're talking about, it's a good reason to put on a mask. And then, like pastors, the very nature of their job doesn't make it very useful to be open and honest. So it's easier. I think it's easier to be disconnected. But I mean, that was part of your story. I know that's part of my story. It's like being in front of people and trying to project something, getting more and more disconnected with my true self and where my heart is.
Well, that's one of the things I loved the most about this conversation with Todd that everybody's about to get to hear is as he was describing what y'all do in Worship Circle, not only in the small groups, but in the gatherings like the Rest Retreat and this thing that they did in Dallas just recently. It's so similar. It's in the same vein, the same category as the work that you said that we do at Roots. And it's because it's not about what's on the surface. It's not about whether it's burnout or addiction. It's the thing under the thing.
Yeah. I think similar to Roots work too is like you have people coming in with a presenting issue. And it's like, okay, here, I need to fix this issue. And then the real work is a really circuitous path. It's not what you think it would be. And I think at Worship Circle, it's a very similar thing. It's like, okay, we're getting together a bunch of worship leaders. Let's talk about ways to manage a worship team and whatever. And Todd's like, no, let's talk about your story and ways that you were wounded as a child, because the best thing we have to offer each other is a healthy self. The best thing you have to offer as a worship leader to your congregation, to your community, is a healthy self. And so both things, it's like you kind of come in, you might think this is what my work is. And the work is actually way different than that. And that's why I love Todd as a leader, just kind of saying, hey, no, we're going this path. We're going to look at stories of your childhood and ways that you were wounded as a kid. It might seem like, what does that have to do with worship leading? And maybe it doesn't have something to do specific with worship leading, other than just being a human and being a healthy human in a system or in a church or any kind of community.
And having healthy people standing up, doing whatever it is that they're called to do, it always makes it better for everybody, for everybody who's involved.
Yes.
Well, I love that you're a part of it. You and Jill both are a part of it, because people who do this, I think I'm the one who said this in the interview, people who do this kind of work tend to find each other.
Yeah.
And it's just really beautiful because it's like you don't really have to do very much to get up to speed with each other, even if you're just meeting.
Totally.
Well, thank you for taking a few minutes to talk about the point where God put it on his heart to start Worship Circle. It's just such an exciting ministry, probably one of those that most people who benefit from it never even know that it exists, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I'm just excited to hear. I'm glad that you guys connected, and I look forward to maybe sitting with the two of you and burning my eyebrows off together. We can all do it at my next birthday party.
Andy, thanks a lot for giving me a few minutes.
Good thing.
Take care.
Always good to see you. All right.
So good to spend some time with Andy, getting ready for our conversation with Todd. Make sure that you check out Andy's new album, Winning Streak, wherever you stream music. But without further ado, here is episode 39 with Todd Fields. It's called You Are Loved and Not Alone, and it starts right now. Todd Fields, this is exciting. The last time I saw you, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. But Todd, I'm glad that you're here.
It's good to be with you, Greg. Man, thanks for having me on.
We met in a backyard lot by a bonfire about 2 years ago, where dead Christmas trees were shooting flames 30 feet in the air.
Yep.
And anybody who knows Andy Gullahorn is not surprised that it was at his house for his birthday party.
Yeah, man. I'd heard rumors about this whole thing he did, and then when I saw it live, I was like, this is really happening.
This is really happening. You could be 40 feet away from the fire and you still feel it when you throw one of those.
It's so hot, and it's not just one tree. Andy collects them, so there's like 40 or 50 stored up in a pile. It's kind of a crazy event.
It's a thing. Like he printed up signs after the holidays. He put signs up in his neighborhood asking people to put their trees in the street, and then they collect them, and because this is an annual thing.
Well, and the cool thing about Andy is he's such a gatherer. He invites people in the neighborhood to come hang with all of us, and it's just it was fun to meet you there.
Who was that? Who was that dude? The neighbor who looked like he was in his 60s or 70s that had the awesome white ponytail.
I know. I don't remember his name, but he was the kindest.
He was really a super kind guy. Mm-hmm. Well, from us talking around the bonfire that I've got a history as a worship leader, and I have for years heard and mimicked your records when I was doing that. So it was nice to get to meet you, and I was really grateful when we saw each other last month at Andy's party, and you said you'd be on the podcast. So thanks for being here. And I'll ask you the question we always start with, which is, Todd, what do you really want out of our conversation today?
I think, it's a great question. I've been on a journey, Greg, as we've talked multiple times now in Andy's backyard of just, I believe God is a connector. And I always say my prayer since I've been young is like, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing. And if I'm headed in a direction that you want to intervene in, I'm just going to be open to that. And so far, he's done that. And that's how I met you, man. So I feel like what I want is just continued, good conversation with you, understanding what you guys do. And hopefully we can just, have an honest heart-to-heart conversation. I really love talking to you those times at Andy's party. So let's go.
Thanks.
Let's continue that conversation.
Right back at you. I realize after 2 times now of having some pretty focused conversations at that party, some conversations you walk away feeling like, man, I really got to know that person. And that's true. Yeah. But also with more time and more experience, you get to know people better. And I know that when there's people that I've been aware of and familiar with for a long time from a distance, I think that there are some stories that I come up with, and this is an opportunity to basically vet those stories. Am I assuming correctly, or there's probably a lot more to the story? So I just want to hear your story. You and I are roughly the same age, so we go back a while. We've had some time in life and in ministry, and I know what I've heard from your records and what you've put out there, but I don't know a whole lot about you personally. So this is the awkward part where I ask the guest to talk about himself.
Well, I'm 55 now, born in 69. Crazy, Greg. What happened to time? And for those of you listening that are younger, just strap in because it goes by fast. And everybody tells you that. I
hit 55 this summer.
Yeah, man, I'm a Southern kid. I grew up near Stone Mountain, Georgia in the 70s, which I thank God all the time that I got to grow up in an era where there was so much really amazing variety musically. I still go back to that time. Just the TV shows, the toys, it was just and I know everybody has different memories of decades, but I'm grateful for that time. But I grew up in Stone Mountain, really wanted to play soccer in my early days, started playing in first grade. That was the thing. We interacted with some of the Atlanta Chiefs professional club in town, and I was on the track with playing classic and stuff like, man, this is what I want to do with my life, until I heard Michael Jackson's song Beat It, and I heard Eddie Van Halen's guitar. I was like, what is that? And so that was kind of I was curious about guitar, and my dad had an old Yamaha classical laying around, got into that. He paid for me to have folk guitar lessons, Bob Dylan, Peter, Paul, and Mary. Man, that just kind of, then there was, again, like we talked about at the beginning, God orchestrates things, and he's always connecting things if we'll just take the next step. Ended up at First Baptist Atlanta. This guy named Andy Stanley was starting a band for our youth group. My parents encouraged me to try out for that. I did. So I started really serving and playing music in the church in like 9th to 10th grade. And we had a ton of kids come, and we'd sing and play, and great stuff. Graduated Georgia State University. Those were fun years. Went on a mission trip to overseas with Graham Kendrick was there. First time I'd ever
Shine, Jesus, shine.
Yeah, man. First time I'd ever seen like a worship band, because we were at First Baptist. We were just doing choir and orchestra and hymns, and that was great. Still great. But got over there, saw that, and then somehow coming out of that, I got connected with Billy Graham's team through a guy named John Ennis, who played piano with Billy for years, and we ended up doing some small crusades with an associate named Ralph Bell. Did some stuff with Billy. Ended up sometimes in front of 90,000 people. Like, what am I doing?
Wow.
There was always this, even in some of the work I've done, Greg, it's like, I feel like I was always trying to go, Lord, why am I here? What are you doing with me? What's my purpose or whatever? And just trying to follow along with that. In the midst of all that, it's playing and singing, and people were like, hey, you're good at this. And then life intersected around the same time as the Billy Graham thing with Louie Giglio. He came to Atlanta. We started this thing called 722. That was kind of my formal introduction to worship music, because up until then it had been a guitar in the youth group, and if you're happy and you know it,
Yeah.
And so there was an intersection, really an explosion with Louie and Choice Ministries out of Baylor and coming back to Atlanta. So I was kind of in the midst of that for a decade. That was part of Passion being born. Chris Tomlin would come hang, Charlie Hall, Christy and Nathan Knuckles were involved with that at the time. And so I just kind of have always been like, for some reason, Lord, you have me plugged in and I'm doing this stuff and I'm just taking the next step I know to do.
Mm-hmm.
Got married in 1996. Carrie and I have 4 sons, Chandler, Carter, Connor, and Colin. That's been a crazy ride, fun. They're awesome. As you know, as a parent, it's like the ups and downs and the stuff. But back to going to Russia on this mission trip and seeing Graham. At the time, I had a friend that, I say friend loosely, we were acquaintances. We got to hang some named Wes King.
Oh, yeah.
And so I went and hung out with Wes and Winder at his brother Mitch's house. And I just remember Wes was kind of brand new on the scene. He was touring with Amy Grant. And I was like, no way, I'm sitting next to Wes and he's letting me play his White Gibson. So there was this thing in me when I got back from the mission trip, like, I'm going to go to Nashville and I'm going to be a songwriter and singer. Like, that's what I wanted to do. And through God's providence, that didn't happen. But I ended up staying in Atlanta and being involved with worship music. And, what is that? Lord, what are you doing with this? What does that even mean to me? Northpoint Community Church started back then. I was part of that for years. Saw God do some amazing things, especially during those early years. Because I always say when you're part of something starting and you don't know what you're doing, it's a really good thing, because you have to risk a lot, and you have to say, we don't know, but we're going to pray and we're going to lean in. And those were great days. I think when I was about 43, I remember standing on stage, and this is years have passed. I've got kids. I've written some songs, had some really small, songs get out there that people knew I wrote. And there was that thing in me, Greg, where I remember, before I die, I want to write one song that everybody remembers me by. So there was this longing in me to be seen. And at the time, I didn't even know where that was coming from or what that meant. I do remember standing on stage Sunday after Sunday, and at one point kind of going, I think I've been 100% as much as I can doing all this for God. Mm-hmm. And I think there's people in this room I'm trying to make happy and be proud of me. And what do I do with that? And so I remember thinking, Lord, I don't want to live anymore for anyone else's approval in this room. I don't know what that means, but I'm here. And it was at that point, man, where I walked in. A friend of mine, Reggie Campbell, invited me on a men's conference, and I showed up in a room with round tables and about 100 guys who were literally not wearing masks anymore. And I was like, what is this? It was authentic community. Like, we're not hiding anymore.
Yeah.
And the thought I had is, I'm going to be okay. No matter what happens in my life, I'm going to be okay. There is a place where I can be fully known and loved and seen, and it doesn't have to be on a stage, but whatever. Here's just some dudes that are like, oh my gosh, we're all this broken as one another. And that was the beginning of God stirring something in me. The other thing that happened, Greg, is I I got to take just my guitar and lead these guys in worship for the weekend. And there was no production, there was no smoke, no lights, no programming, none of that. And it was just such a breath of fresh air. And kind of God was just going, let's go back to the beginning where it's just you and me, your story, a song, and Todd, I just want your heart, So that's kind of where this whole worship circle ministry started around that time. A little after I was driving back up there after having dinner with a friend one night, I had to go back into town and listen to a friend of mine, Christy Knockel's album, Into the Glorious. And my friend Larry Green had said, hey, God can sometimes speak and whisper things to us through music.
Yeah.
Through the stillness, through a song. And I just remember playing that record. It was raining and I wept literally for an hour and I didn't even know where it was coming from. And I got there and I walked in and I saw a friend of mine and he saw my eyes were just red and he just gave me a big hug. And I said, I don't know what's going on, but God's doing something. And he basically just said, I love you, Todd, in the car for an hour.
Oh, wow.
I had never really heard. It was basically him just going, I love you. Like, be still. I love you. There's nothing else you need to do for me. I approve of you. You're my son. Kind of on the heels of that, I felt like, man, there's so many people like me that are in ministry that have not yet received the simple power of that one thing.
Yeah. As you're sharing this, and thank you for sharing that, by the way, it's so encouraging to hear you talk about what you were noticing and processing. And that's the thing I actually jotted down as you were talking. There were multiple things going on in this season of your life where something came to your attention, right? When you said, I'm pretty sure I was doing this for the Lord, but then I realized one day, like, I really want to make the people in the room happy and pleased with me. And then the other one was where you were with those other guys and they weren't wearing masks and you just noticed what that was like. I don't know if you have noticed this or gone through it yourself, but my tendency throughout life has been when something like that pops up on the radar is I'll just immediately react, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to seek people's approval. So, and just like, stop doing that.
Yeah.
But that's not what I heard you say. You noticed it and said, what's this about? And kind of dug in deeper. And I think that it seems like that's an important, maybe discipline is the word, is to slow things down enough to notice and process what's coming up. Because on the one hand, you could say, is it wrong to be happy if people are happy with me? Like, that's not wrong, but is it what's motivating me? And if you don't take enough time to say, I wonder where that's coming from and what's going on here, we have a chance to miss something. And when you slow down and noticed it, you're getting there. We're going to talk more about worship circle in a minute, but it sounds like those things you were noticing were pretty catalytic to worship circle being created. They
were. And when you say slow down, that sounds foreign to me because I wasn't slowing down. In fact, that was, I was in a sense, and I've always wanted to pay attention, but I think what I'm learning now, and you and I have talked at Andy's about kind of doing your family of origin work and story work and like, why am I anxious and in a hurry all the time? And instead of like ignoring that, learning to slow down and go be curious about it. So since that time, man, I've been on this journey, and it seems like every year God just continues to peel a layer off the onion, and it's not fast, and I can't accelerate it. All I know to do is to say, that's how I met Andy, Greg. I met Andy at a men's weekend that Michael Cusick invited me to be a part of because my wife, Carrie, and I were going through some work with him. And I'm like, and honestly, when he invited me into it, I didn't want to go. I was like, yeah, I'm good. And there was this thing in me, probably didn't know to pay attention to stuff, but I had this thought that if I had a hard year and I learned something, everything was going to be okay now.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden I would get to the end of that year and there would still be something new. It's like, no, we're not, Todd, we're not done with this process.
Can I ask you to hang on a second? Because when you said, if I go through something, if I learn something, That sounds transactional, right?
Yeah.
It's like if I have a lesson, then that means that this is okay.
Yeah.
Right? Is that kind of how it was for you? We'll be right back.
How have things gotten so out of control? How did something that didn't seem like such a big deal at first completely take over? Porn and sex addiction are destroying your life and killing your relationships. You know you can't keep going on like this, keeping secrets and telling lies. Something has to change. But how? Most men who struggle with unwanted or addictive sexual behavior have tried to fix it on their own. But sex addiction is powerful and complicated. Recovery is possible, but it isn't easy. It requires us to focus on more than just behavior. It requires us to look at our whole lives and the parts of our stories that contribute to addiction. If you're ready to find freedom, maybe it's time for you to get to the roots. The Roots Retreat is a 4-day therapeutic and spiritual intensive. You'll work with therapists and coaches who specialize in sex addiction and recovery. You'll learn how to take healthy ownership of your behavior. You'll discover how your life experiences set the stage for addiction to develop. You'll see how God factors into your struggle, and you'll learn effective tools for ongoing recovery after the retreat. If you're ready to stop trying what doesn't work, if you're ready to experience real hope, healing, and change, let's get to the roots.
Visit awakenrecovery.com/Roots Retreat or click the Roots Retreat link in show notes.
Yeah. I learned the next 3 principles I need to know. And I went through this to learn them. And now I can tell you about them. Versus, even I met with my friend who helps me check in every now and then with how I'm doing the other day. And he just said, man, I'm so excited that you've got a vision for ministry and helping these people. Don't forget to pay attention to what you need.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been because I'm in ministry and I'm trying to help other people, I can forget that unless I'm on the continued journey of connecting with others.
Yeah. Being
curious about my desires, where they come from, how they were distorted, and continue to be curious around that. And my story, from what I understand from this work, Greg, it's not going to end on this earth. And that makes me really frustrated as a guy who could score goals in the soccer net and feel good at the end of a game and go, cool, we did it.
Yeah.
Or write a song and record a record and go, man, I did it.
And completion.
Yeah. And you get to look at it and you codify it and there it is. Cool. That was a great season. We're done. And every time there's a season that's hard and I get done with it, I feel like God's going, you ready for what's next?
And you're like, are you kidding?
And it's that whole Henry Nouwen thing. It's just like, there's suffering and there's stuff that I can't fix.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really frustrating to a guy who his whole life has been able to pull the rabbit out of the hat at the last minute.
All right. That feels important because when you say it's hard for somebody who has been able to pull the rabbit out of the hat, that sounds like a lot of people in ministry.
Yep.
You probably already know what I mean by that. But as somebody who was an onstage worship leader for 15 years, there were a lot of rabbits pulled from a lot of hats. And it's like when it happens, the narrative is, oh, well, that was what a spirit-led moment when that thing but honestly, I had the skill to where I could have done that with or without the Holy Spirit. And that, I don't like that. That kind of leads me to the next question that I wanted to ask you. This work that you've done in your own story, your own family of origin, your own experiences with trauma, do you, and if so, why do you think it's important for not only worship leaders, but generally for people who are in vocational ministry to go deeper into their hearts and deeper into their stories? I mean, this is work that everybody needs to do, right? But
in fact, we're about to go to Dallas and teach on this next week. So you're asking me a great question.
So and this event you're going to talk about will have already happened by the time this episode goes up. But I do want you to talk about it because is there a sense in which there are unique reasons why worship leaders and other people in vocational ministry, it's particularly important for them to do this work?
Yeah, I would say it's important to do for everyone that God created to do this work. if you're in ministry in a place where you're called to help direct people toward God's glory, God's relationship with God, I think we carry an extra measure of responsibility to be authentic in that pursuit and authentic in that journey. And the reason I've learned that paying attention to our story matters is because the places where we were harmed are the places where God put his fingerprint on us to receive the most glory through our unique life. And until we can identify and go back to those places, sometimes we can't see our calling. For instance, just to be transparent, there's a lot for me that the word abandonment comes up.
Okay.
And again, I love my mom and dad. There's not and everybody would say, I love my mom and dad. They did, and the phrase we often hear is they did the best they could. And yes, in Adam Young, my friend would say, no, they didn't, because they're not perfect.
Well, they may have done the best they could, but as kids, we need them to do better than any parents are able to do. Yeah,
from the work I've done, everybody needs a face. Everybody's born, as Kurt Thompson said, looking for a face, looking for them.
Looking for someone, looking for us. Yep.
Yeah. And so for me, it was like I would go back and forth between my grandmother and my mom when I was a little, and my brain was being wired in those years. And so there was a bit of like, who am I attaching to? Who am I? Looking back on it, I just felt a little bit alone a lot. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the harm hit me. And so as I'm doing some work, just to let your listeners in, we were in a group in Nashville last January, and Adam Young said, Todd, is it any wonder that God's created you to be a gatherer, to bring people in to know they're loved and not alone? Because you've been longing for community your whole life.
What was it like to hear another person say that and let you hear his voice saying it? Because it was already internal in you.
It was great, but it was in the context of being in a room with Andy and like 3 other guys. And for them to know me somewhat and have watched, this story unfold for Andy for the past few years, but for these other guys longer than that, and for them to go, yep. Like they all see it,
Mm-hmm.
And it's beautiful and it's sad and it's also glorious, and I wouldn't change a thing. So the reason why I think it's important, and even what we're going to talk about next week, so many of us believe that God most wants what we can do for him. Like, hey, there's a war to fight. Here's your gun, go fight. And I used to liken it to this. Well, do I really love my country? Do I really know myself? And so I think I just grew up in a context where, man, we've got to get people to pray the prayer. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. How many people prayed the prayer? How many people made decisions without ever being curious about, well, I prayed the prayer, so I'm a new creation in Christ.
Yeah.
So there's no work for me to do because God's redeemed me, right? Unfortunately, we live in bodies that, for better or worse, have memory.
Yes.
And nervous systems and brains that are wired with harm and stuff, and reacted and compensated. And so much of what we did to survive is our survival mechanism. So the beauty of this, Greg, and it's so hard, but it's also so amazing. If we can find people, if we can encourage people in ministry to be curious about, one, what it's like to be Andy used to say this, what's it like to be on the other side of me? That's a great question to ask. Carrie would often tell me, hey, you're not listening, or I don't feel like you're present. Mm-hmm. And my knee-jerk reaction was, yes, I am. I'm listening, But when other people start telling you that, you're like, maybe there's something to that. Mm-hmm. Well, where's that coming from? Todd, what are you concerned about? Well, I'm thinking about the fact that I just got a text about Sunday service and we're changing a song and I'm always accessible. There's just so much in ministry that I don't think Jesus would do. He did not live at the pace we live in modern day. He had boundaries. He rested. He didn't heal everybody.
Right.
Even the one that really boggles my mind, he rose from the dead. And in modern day America, one of the disciples would say, I found him, we're going to have a concert. And we're going to get as many people in the building as possible and say, Jesus rose from the dead. Look at this. This is miraculous.
Mm-hmm.
And the one we call Lord and Savior went and made breakfast for his betrayers.
Wow.
There's so much to unpack there around the modern church and what we value with the numbers thing. So I'm just in a spot, man, where I've got to start with myself. That is not selfish. I've got to be curious about what I'm feeling in my body, where it's coming from, because it usually tells a story of something, which when I identify it can help me understand what God wants to do with my unique life. And so that's kind of we say the work, and but it's never going to stop.
Discovering what God wants to do with me and my unique life. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm zooming out, and I'm thinking the desire for the same thing for all the men and women who are leading worship gatherings.
Yep.
Can they get any confident answer to that question if they don't believe that they're loved and if they believe that they're alone?
I don't think so. And I think that whole phrase comes from my wounding, but it also, I just remember there being this tension between standing on a stage in front of thousands of people and feeling really alone.
Yeah.
Like most people would go, dude, that's a dream job.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be like, yeah, I'm known by name by many, and I'm known by name by my gifting.
Mm-hmm.
But who really knows me?
Right.
Who knows the desires of my heart? Who knows where I struggle? Who's with me? And I think I felt that in the early years. Our family felt that, being in a public spotlight, like there's no safe place.
Yeah, I'm really resonating with that, because I'm thinking back to the days that I was a church worship leader.
Yeah.
And that was still in the days that I was deep in my addiction that nobody knew about. So obviously that was the biggest complicating factor. But when you said earlier you were describing this belief that God most wants what we can do for him. Mm-hmm. There was something even before I was exposed, even before, all of those things changed in my life. I can remember the church where I worked, we went through a relocation that involved a massive AV renovation in the building that we moved into. And, whenever you first move into a new context, there's a lot of punch lists, there's a lot of evaluating. And it was feeling to me like every Sunday I would just flinch and brace myself for the scrutiny that I felt like was coming on Monday. Because I felt like that next meeting is going to be about everything that went wrong. Totally. And I remember a couple of times, because I was living such a compartmentalized life, I would still pray. And at the end of a service, I can remember praying, well, Lord, I hope that you were pleased with what just happened, because I'm pretty sure nobody else was. Mm. And who would know that was going on? Because I have a smile on my face. Yeah. I'm not going to let anybody know that I'm doubting, that I'm discouraged, that I'm, fighting depression because I'm keeping this huge secret that would blow up my life if anybody knew it. Mm-hmm. And so I when I met you and you were telling me about Worship Circle, I was thinking, wow, if that would have been around when I was a church worship leader, I don't know that I still don't know that I would have admitted what was going on.
Sure.
But I think that it would have made it harder for me to stay so isolated, because I think it would have been somebody holding right in front of me a picture of this is what you've been just dying for, starving for.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just looking at what you guys do with sexual recovery and addiction, it's like, I know we've got small groups that month one, mm-hmm. if one person says, there's been seasons in my life where I've struggled with pornography, you can see around even on a Zoom screen, the guys it's almost like everybody takes a deep breath and they go, wait a minute, did he just say what I think he said? And then all of a sudden,
somebody said the thing out loud.
Dude, they did. And I remember the first time I heard that one, back in probably in the late 90s when I was meeting with some guys, somebody said something and I was like, oh, wow, they're going to get real here, Yep. And so that's not everybody's struggle. Everybody's got different stuff. But to be able to show up and say, John Lynch wrote a book called The Cure. He's a friend of mine.
He's been on the show. Yeah.
Yeah, I love John. You know, he has that phrase, what if there was a place so safe that the worst of me could be known, and I'd find I'd be loved more and not less in the telling of it. I heard that at the minute he was speaking at the thing that changed my life, right? And John was the speaker. Yeah. And that was part of the freedom I felt. Like, man, shame has just got so many of us, like in its grip. And it really does lose its power when we just show up and bring everything out and go, man, this isn't as powerful as I thought it was. Especially, you know, you talk about guys like Jay Stringer and people that are getting into like in what you guys do. Like, what's the source of your longing?
Which is a great question.
Yeah, that's a different question than, as Kathy Lorzell says, popping the rubber band on your wrist. You know, it's like,
yeah.
It's like that was the thing back in the day. Like, man, I've had an impure thought. I'm going to punish myself. And but what if we were kind and curious about, man, what are you really, really, really longing for? Because it's not this.
Yeah,
it's a cheap substitute. All that to say, for people who stand on stages behind microphones, to have a space where they can show up and go, me too.
Yes,
and they can process and try to get to the why. You know. Way more than an accountability group. That's a thing, but it's also let's dig deeper. Let's do some gradual excavation of like what happened to you.
Yes, because like you very correctly said a couple minutes ago, not everybody's thing is porn or overt sexual brokenness. For many it is, but not for everybody. But everybody has got that thing that's their thing that is the on-ramp, the entry point of shame into their lives. Yep. And everybody whose thing is sexual brokenness thinks that theirs is the worst, right? Yeah. Everybody whose thing is substances thinks that their thing is the worst. Mm-hmm. Everybody whose thing is toxic relationships thinks that their thing is the worst, because shame is not all that creative. I mean, it's the same message for everybody. It's very opportunistic. Sure. You've probably seen in these small groups that you facilitate that when somebody's being vulnerable about something, that has benefit for people, even if their thing is a different struggle. Yeah,
because it all comes back to, do you love me?
Right.
Will you love me?
Am I loved? Am I safe? Safe, soothed, seen, secure.
Man, there's no names here, but I had a person in the world of worship circle reach out to me and said, hey, I confess to this, to my small group. Mm-hmm. If you guys need me to bail, I'm okay with that. You know, there may be some church discipline or whatever. And I just remember saying, if we did that, we shouldn't even keep our doors open.
Right. Did that make you so sad just for that person to make that offer?
Yes. It was an indictment on what we're all living in. Mm-hmm. Now we're going to cast you out.
Right.
But here's a person going, I'm finally going to be brave enough to just speak out what I've been struggling with. And I said, friend, your love, like John said, I love you more now because you told me. And I love you. And we as a community, we're not going to go public with this, but you, man, you just show up and be loved. That's it. That's all I know to do.
It is an indictment on what has always been just the automatic, reactive course of action when somebody who's in a leadership position fails or falls. And I'm not saying that that's never something that has to happen, right? There are some times in which continuing in that leadership, it's not practical or biblical, at least for a season. But I'll never forget, I heard Michael Cusick when he came to Birmingham like 12 years ago, and he was speaking at Beeson Divinity School. He did a Q&A for people who are training for ministry. And one of the questions is, when there's somebody in leadership or on staff that has a failing, as church leadership, what do you do? Yeah. And he says, well, the first thing is get them help, rally around that person, around their family, and say, what do we need to do to be a part of the healing that needs to take place? So let's do that. Let's figure out what you need, and let's get that in place. Let's figure out if there's a need to pay for it. Let's figure out how we can help pay for it. Mm-hmm. By the way, you may or may not keep your job, but that's not a today decision. But the fact that the offer from the person in the worship circle small group was, hey, something's happened, and I understand if you need me to go away. It's sad.
They weren't even in a leadership position. They were just a group member.
Right.
It was like, are you kidding me? Like, no.
Now, I think that in the 16 years I've been in recovery, I've seen a lot of progress in the church, that we don't do that as often as it used to happen.
Yeah.
And so some of it is the element of we've got a lot of room for improvement, and there has been some. Some of it is just the shame that was going on in that person, right?
Sure.
Whether or not the reality is that it made sense for them to back out, there's a shameful voice inside telling them that this is a certainty. So, it's not always the church's fault that we think these things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's our enemy who's just really telling us lies.
Yep. I just think where harm has happened, or where confession has happened, love kind of would require that we extend grace. I think we have to differentiate between putting them in a leadership position versus caring for people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can you imagine if somebody says, hey, I've been in a deep addiction of this and I want everybody, I'm coming clean and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, you're fired and we're not paying you another 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
It was like, what can we do to support you and your family's journey toward healing financially and with connection? If you need to work somewhere else for a while where you're off the stage, and we're going to network to plug you in somewhere where you can make income.
Or the other side that would also be harmful is to say, ooh, this is a great opportunity. Like, there's a hook here, and get them back on stage sharing that story too soon.
Well, that's a whole other podcast. Because we talk often, and some of the people I have on, like Carrie Garcia has become a friend, Kathy Lorzell, but Carrie talks about the fact that we long for a king.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way, when Jesus rode in on Palm Sunday, we wanted a political savior. We wanted an earthly king.
Yeah.
So many people have, especially in like just American megachurch culture, it's like we need a savior and this is our person.
Yeah.
And they have a gift and it's from God, but we abdicate our royalty and the unique glory of God on each of us. How many more people out of these 2,500 people in the room have a gift that they're not using because we've just let one person carry it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious,
Right.
Like, how many people will say, could have had the gift of teaching, I never really explored that because they're so good. I could never be that good,
Right. So like, how many people who were sitting under Louie's teaching talk themselves out of exercising that gift because they think, well, I'm not Louie.
Yeah, or it's easier for me just to say Louie's got the message.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm kind of going, we've all got a message.
That's right.
Anyway, it is that loved and not alone message. Back to that. All of us have intrinsic value as sons and daughters of God, and we all have a story. We've all been harmed, and there's such hope.
But the time we have left, I want to let you tell a little bit more about what happens when people connect with Worship Circle. Have you had people who checked it out thinking that this is going to be like a resourcing thing, like this is going to make me a more effective tactical worship leader, and then they find, oh no, this is something very, very different?
Greg, it's a great question. It's one that I struggle with. I was even talking to a good friend yesterday about it. I just said, there's so much information out there about how to be a better worship leader.
Mm-hmm.
And Carrie said the other day on a podcast, if information caused transformation, we'd all be 100% great right now because we've got plenty of it.
Yes.
So I'm kind of looking at it. And so what we try to do in Worship Circle is we try to give people just some really good practical thoughts and helps, with probably about 35% of the work we'll do online is going to be practical stuff. But we cannot ignore the bigger thing under the water of the iceberg, which is your heart, your story, who God created you to be, the unique voice, the unique.
Well, sure we can. We can ignore it, and that's why people are coming to you, right? Because it's been ignored.
Yeah. And so
but if it's 70% of what you do, that tells me your priority of recognizing how absent it's been. Yeah.
I mean, like you said, I think so much of this has become, it's basically the wake of the journey God's had me on with these friends like John Lynch, Michael Cusick, Adam Young, Kathy Lorzell, soon to be Dan Allender. Like, for some reason that I can't explain other than God, he's intersected my life with these people. And I mean, Andy and Jill could tell you, like, I didn't orchestrate any of this. Like, God just, I mean, I showed up at a workshop a year ago and all of a sudden Adam's like, man, your music impacted me. I didn't even know who he was. And then, so now through him, he invited me to come do a storywork thing in Colorado and stay in his house, and he made me dinner. I'm like, are you kidding me? And so obviously God is, I think he really wants to come for his kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And he wants to say, hey, you've thought that what I most wanted from you was your gifting, and I just want your heart.
Mm-hmm. And
the world and even the church system they will use up your gifting because it's good and it's from me. But it kind of is a diminished gifting if not paired with a whole heart and a healed heart. And so I think, like if you would ask me, tell me your story 5 years ago, 10 years ago, my line was, I came from a perfect Christian family. We're like Lever to Beaver, no issues. And come to find out, like, that was not true. And the more I start digging in the dirt and I find the bodies, I'm like, this is again, separate that from love, family, love everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought their harm, their wounding into having a little kid at 20 and 21.
You're describing what Jay calls in his book, holding honor and honesty together. To be honest that what I got was less than what I needed is not to automatically dishonor my caregivers.
Right.
It's to acknowledge their frailty, their inability to be perfect, which the sad thing is, like, we're made for heaven. So we come into a fallen world needing perfection. So it's like from the get-go, we're screwed if the only caregivers we have are going to be the human ones.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that I'm getting clarity and focus for what we're doing at Worship Circle as it pertains to ministry leaders is this word integrated, integrity.
Yep.
I feel like many of us are disintegrated.
Yes.
Meaning we lead with our head.
Only.
Right. I believe the Bible. The verse says this, by faith, I'm going to proclaim the truth loudly with a great melody. And I'm even going to move some people with it.
Which is an important part of it.
And I have yet to grieve and weep over what happened to me in a fallen world. And if those things are brought together and integrated, well, that's where we become ministry leaders or people of integrity. Our head and our heart get connected. I barely know the healthers like Jonathan and Melissa. They have a thing called 18-inch journey. And I was like, what's 18 inches? It's this between your head and your heart.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
It's like, this is not new. They've been doing it, helping young worship leaders for a while now. And it's such a cool thing, but that's the work that's so needed. Like, have you paid attention to you? Have you paid attention to the pain you carry that you've dismissed and thought was not a part of anything, and it would be better to leave it behind and just to proclaim that Jesus rose from the dead and all is well?
Okay, so the integration of both of those aspects, the things that we know with our head, but then also the deep feeling that has been neglected. If we integrate those things, in your experience and what you're hearing from people who come and connect with Worship Circle, is the church allowing for that integration?
I don't think they quite understand it yet. I do know what happens is on the other side of the work, their leadership goes, what's going on? Something's beautiful is happening in our church.
So they know, they couldn't define it, but they know it when they see it.
Yeah, I always tell people, when you get in touch with the reality of how your heart was broken, and you just be in that, if you grieve it, in community with people. And obviously the Holy Spirit, Jesus and God the Father, the Trinity are 100% part of that. But as you do that work and the deeper you go in it and the more you do, I think your song changes.
Mm-hmm.
I think your voice changes. I think your conviction changes. And I just know the more work I do, Greg, the more quickly tears come.
Yeah.
And when I'm leading a song, sometimes I'll just be like, the more work you do, the more present you're able to be with God and others. So I would say for any ministry leader, we always talk about, man, well, Lord, we want to be in your presence. Well, yes, his presence is everywhere, but are you present to yourself? Because that's where God is. He's right there with you.
Yeah.
And as we pay attention to that, and as our hearts begin to crack and open up and become to beat again, I just think the people in the room, without making it about us, are like, oh, wow, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. It sounds beautiful as you talk about it. Okay. So people who are listening, who are volunteers, part-time, full-time leaders of musical worship, and they're hearing you talk about Worship Circle, 30 to 40% of what we offer is, practical things. But the majority is the state of your heart. Do I feel loved and not alone? And they say, tell me more about what you guys do. Tell me more about what you offer. How can I connect? Let's make sure that we don't leave that unsaid.
Yeah. Well, we typically once a year have a thing we call the Summit online. And one of the things that I really love about what we do is it really is centered around small group. You guys follow along at worshipcircle.com or follow us on social media, but we're toying around with doing like a free kind of global event for leaders just to come be cared for without small group. But the thing that's been working for us is our artists, Christian Stanfield, Charlie Hall, Jill and Andy are doing this, but you can literally say, I want to be in Jill's small group, or I want to be in Charity Gale's small group, or I want to be in, Meredith Andrews' small group. And at the summit, you literally show up and you're in small group first. You're not in the big room. It's just you and like 8 other girls.
Mm-hmm. And
that coach or that mentor, that artist is just their goal is just to see you and just to touch the surface on who are you? Where are you coming from? Tell us more about what drew you into this. What are you looking for? What's your heart want right now in this season? What's hard for you right now? What are there things you need to share with us just as anonymous sisters that you might not be able to share with the people because it's just not as safe. Mm-hmm. And then from that, we jump in a massive group and there's like 150 people online and we're like guys and girls together and like, man, this is crazy. And we usually just do some teaching. So that's one way to engage the summit. You can go to the website and go ahead and apply for a small group for next year. We go from January to September. And then in October, we have a retreat called Rest at Stone Mountain, Georgia. And you can come to that even if you're not a member. If you're just a leader and you want to come, please come, sign up. Registration will open. By the time this airs, registration for Rest will be open. worshipcircle.com/rest. The other thing I forgot to say, Greg, is we do have pastor small groups. We've been kind of hearing this from worship leaders, like, I wish my pastor had a place.
Right.
So we started with 2 small groups a year ago. Now we're up to 3, and we have a pastor's wives small group. So the pastors, the 3 groups of pastors, any of their wives that want to be in a group can. So they've got their own small group with a spiritual director leading them. And they're telling us, like, we've never had anybody listen to us like this.
Right.
Our life is seen by everybody, and this is safe. So all that to say, if you're a pastor listening, worshipcirclepastors.com, you can go there. So
that's really cool. I love that, man, because they're the ones who people are looking to listen to.
Yeah, pastors, Louie used to always say that the lead pastor is the worship leader. And I would just try to tell pastors that, like, as your heart goes, so goes the heart of the church. Yes, you're a worship leader and you're a pastor. The excuses we hear, just for any of you guys listening out there, I just want to know you're normal. I've got a lot going on. I don't have time for that. That's an excuse. I always say, if you don't got time for like a small group Zoom call once a month for a couple hours, just be curious about that. Mm-hmm. I can't afford it. It does cost. We do a subscription thing monthly. We have ways to help people financially. A lot of that involves resourcing them with assets to help reach out to their community and be loved in return. And people basically fund their journey.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one for a lot of the leaders and pastors that come in. They're like, I already feel loved and not alone because people that love me have funded my worship circle journey. The other thing we hear is, I'm good. I don't need that. Which I always, when those excuses start coming up, Greg, I'm always like, of course, I don't want to put anybody in a headlock and say you have to be in this, but sure. I am a fan, and I know some people do have really healthy things they're in, and that's great.
Yeah. But
I just know that when you're on the hamster wheel running fast, it's really hard to reach in and grab somebody and pull them off. And a lot of what I do is fight for people to be still.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's hard work. I think it's worth it. And I absolutely love the friends I get to partner with,
Yeah, I know some, and I imagine it hasn't been lost on me that so many of the names that we've both mentioned, like when you start doing this kind of work, you tend to meet the same people, right? Because people who are prioritizing this type of work find each other. And I think that's really beautiful. Yeah,
and it helps me realize that I'm not crazy. Like God's doing something that is involving people from all over. And there seems to be, I think he loves his church. It's his bride. And I think he's like, I want you guys to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
And you've thought that I just wanted you to fill a role and have a job and stand up and speak things. But
yeah, I want you guys to be loved. And I know that you already are.
Yeah.
I want you guys to know that you're loved.
Yeah.
To feel it.
Yeah. It's still back to that thing of, Lord, would you show my friend Reggie Campbell, who's with Jesus now, used to every morning he would keep a journal and he'd be like, Lord, show me how you love me today. And that seems so selfish. I think for some people are like, why are you so me focused? Or even that question, what do you need?
Yeah.
I think it's for far too long we've ignored our needs.
Yes.
And that so many of them are God-given. And if we don't have them, we don't make it.
And we're no good to anybody that we're trying to help and serve.
Exactly.
So good. One last question. Favorite song that you've written and favorite song to lead when you're in that context of worship leading?
Favorite song I've written is called God Is One. It's on a self-titled album I did when I was like 43, maybe 40. It's the song that Adam Young told me that was the one that got him. I just feel like that song came from a very desperate and real place. A friend of ours had just lost a friend in a car wreck. And it's one of those where you just go, it wrote itself, in 10 or 15 minutes. So God Is One. And then my favorite song to lead, man, is I've got a lot of songs I love, a lot of hymns, but I got to tell you, give it to old Andrew Peterson to write Is He Worthy?
Yeah.
When I play that song and the way that song progresses, I just feel like, to me, it just moves my heart like no other song I lead.
So good. Yeah. Love that.
There's such a longing in it, that it's almost like it taps into that all creation groans, an expectation for what's to come. And I feel like Andrew just totally tapped into that in that song, and it just messes me up big time.
Well, in the asking the questions, you could take that as rhetorical, or you could take it as, I really need you to tell me, that this thing that we say we believe is real. Like there's almost, you can feel a desperation in it. Like, I need you to say he is.
Yeah, it's got that both these songs I mentioned are us longing for home. And one's a song people can sing in a room, and one's just me sharing my heart,
Mm-hmm.
But it's all, I think we all just long for this thing God said where every people and tribe, nation, and tongue is going to come together in redemption. And it's going to be amazing. And I think it's built into us. We long for it.
Well, I just appreciate so much that you are working in this season of your life to help people in ministry see that that's what God wants for them, and to experience a taste of it while we're waiting for the ultimate experience with it. So thanks for what you're doing with Worship Circle. It's so important. I've heard other people talking about it so well that, I just say, well done
Thanks, Greg.
in receiving that was something that God wanted you to do and doing it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's just fun to be on a journey that's rewarding, but really hard at the same time. It's not an easy work.
Yeah.
We're literally fighting for presence and fighting for something that doesn't seem normal because the world's so noisy right now.
Yep. Well, bringing a little peace and quiet. That's a good thing. Todd, thanks so much for spending some time with me. This has been great. I can't believe it's been over an hour.
Well, I remember when I talked to you at Andy's birthday parties, I always loved the conversation. So I think your history in worship leading and just the work God has you doing, and it's all kind of really close to what we do.
Yeah, I think we're trying to bring the same type of love and belonging to people in different contexts. And so it's always fun to vibe with people who have the same heart. So thanks for what you do, and thanks for letting our listeners hear you talk about it.
It's been an honor, man. Thanks for having me on.